Hello, my name is EJ and this is going to be my presentation on the effects of an anthropogenic diet and urbanization on physiological raccoon health and fitness. So to start off, I just have like a brief outline to kind of generally goes what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to have a short introduction, I'm going to go over what scientists do know, what scientists do not know, a possible research that I think I would do if I had all the time and money in the world, and why I think this is important. So first off, what is urbanization? It's an area in which humans live. This can be cities, towns, suburbs, etc. But the result of this is like stuff like infrastructure and various types of pollution, like sound pollution, light pollution, trash, and CO2 emissions. And this right here on the presentation is a nighttime view of America from NASA back in like 2010, which just shows the amount of land area we as humans have covered in America. And next, what is an anthropogenic food source? So this is food which comes in contact with animals due to human activities, such as like farmland, feeding wildlife if you ever fed fish as a kid, or things like trash cans that raccoons, and I know I have a possum in my house that feeds up my compost bin, but she's a sweetie. And what raccoons would normally eat is stuff like seeds, nuts, small mammals, fish, insects, and fruit. So the idea of trash is very interesting, and you're going to see why. So the overall objective, I'm going to cover so my overall objective is to understand any adverse or positive effects that these factors can have in raccoons in order to better understand how to prevent these effects or encourage the positive ones. So the overall objective of researching this topic was just that in general, as well as the final objective is to understand if these factors have any sort of effect on the populations and fitness, and if so, how can this be used to create a more sustainable population against invasive raccoons, which there's a lot of around the world. What science knows? Newsflash, it's not really much. This isn't a very well researched topic. Most research on this topic is from the past few years, if anything. And almost every paper that I've read stated in some way just how little they actually know about the effects of urbanization or anthropogenic food sources on raccoons. So for my first key point of what science knows is there is a common trend in hyperglycemia between populations that have been researched. So what is hyperglycemia? It's when you have a high glucose or sugar level in your bloodstream, which is caused by your body not producing enough insulin, because insulin absorbs glucose into cells to be used as energy. So this is the leading indicator for diabetes, as you probably may know someone who takes insulin, and this is why that happens. So what this leads to over time is an increase in weight for populations which show high rates of hyperglycemia, and this is known to come from anthropogenic food sources, which happens in people as well. You probably also know somebody with diabetes or some sort of form of this you see here. So the study was there's 3 populations of raccoons believed to be in contact with varying levels of anthropogenic food sources, more specifically garbage. And you can see here in figure 2, the table showing the body weight in correlation to the different amounts of garbage that raccoons were exposed to. And you can see a very clear trend here. And over here in figure 1, this talks about body weight in relation to GSP. And what that is that's like the average amount of glucose in the blood in the past few weeks, which is not the only contributor to body weight, which is why correlation isn't as significant as the one here on the right. But this is just another small chart, which is interesting because it does show a slight correlation. So next I'm going to look at digestive anatomy. I'll just start here. Comparative analysis of several organs and tissues, including stomach, esophagus, teeth, liver, pancreas, small intestines. So really any digestive organs you can think of. And it was compared between raccoons who were exposed to anthropogenic food and ones who weren't. They say that the physiological structure and functionality of these components really show no distinct differences, except for a potentially larger esophagus in urban raccoons. So really looking at like macro digestive analysis or an anatomy, not really much is seen there. But there is potentially something here with the teeth that I'm going to talk about in a second. But really it's not good data to go off of. And here's just a small, tiny raccoon who's been cut up. We'll look at. So overall, most organs like the stomach, small intestine, or large intestine were extremely varied in size across both communities. So there's really no correlation there that could be used to suggest diet has any impact on these features. Organs like the liver and pancreas showed no physical distinctions between communities whatsoever. And again, the one I talked about which did were the teeth over here. The only notable bit of info is that different populations differed in different teeth sizes. So for example, you can see the tooth M1 and P4. So for example, one population would have different P4 sizes when comparing urban and rural raccoons. A different population would have, for example, different M1 tooth sizes. So it really wasn't that safe of a thing to go off of, I guess, because different populations varied in different aspects of the teeth anatomy. And for the esophagus, only hollow organ which showed a correlation between communities and individuals with distinct availability to anthropogenic food. It showed that raccoons in more urban environments could have adapted to gorge larger volumes of food. Not exactly sure why that is. But just to cap this off, this is macroanatomy. More needs to be researched into the more microanatomy. Things like DNA analysis and histology, which is the microscopic structure of tissues, to really see if there is some sort of impact there that an anthropogenic food source has. And finally, we have sex-dependent consequences. Just overall, males seem to be healthier than females when in an urban environment. The potential reasons to this could be due to breeding seasons, females may have to rely upon more of an income-like feeding system where they ingest food when necessary to preserve any sort of energy for lactation in their kits, while males can feed for capital and preserve fat energy for future use. They can just kind of go out longer all day, find food, eat it, fatten up, unlike the females can. Also, while caring for kits, the females may be restricted to a very shorter range around their dens in which they can forage for food, while again males do not have this restriction during any sort of mating seasons. And raccoons can have many mating seasons a year, so being in urban areas, female raccoon health can deteriorate much greater than males can over a long period of time. This has been seen in different populations. This phenomena here does not occur in the wild. It would be really unsustainable for females to live in a much lower health state most of their lives. So this is seen to be an urban exclusive. So that's really all that science knows, and it's not really a lot, which sucks. Really what they don't know is a good impact on fitness and breeding, or any correlation between population and density. Not enough support for really most of the research that's been done. There needs to be more. In those photos I showed you for the anatomy was the first ever research on any sort of raccoon anatomy in correlation to urbanization and anthropogenic food sources. We don't know what sort of adaptation or if any evolution is occurring. We don't know whether they prefer urban or rural. And most of the research was done in a very small geographic range, which was mostly the upper Midwest, which there are raccoons all around the world. So it's a really small area to look at. What should be researched, or at least what I think. If this was a perfect world I could run any experiment I wanted, I would set up a control group with any number of experimental groups, each in a natural environment which doesn't allow the migration in or out of territories. The control group would live and forage entirely off of local food sources, while the experimental groups are fed varying anthropogenic foods. For example, one group is fed foods high in carbs, another fat, another sugars. And over time, you would document any physiological or nutritional health changes in populations, as well as document any sort of adaptations which may be occurring. This would be very time-consuming, but allow for more controlled research as opposed to what most research has been done on any of these topics, where they'll cover many different large cities or like 6 to 7 states at once in one project. It's really hard to grasp an idea of what is happening to very specific populations unless you like focus it in really. The importance of this. So we don't know if anthropogenic food sources are having negative impact on immune health due to foreign foods, and if it is, how could this impact pets, like human pets, and then through them humans. I had a dog, Petey, once, who had contact with a pet raccoon I used to have, Rocky. He was wild, but we like domesticated him kind of, and we would feed him a lot. But he had canine distemper, and we didn't know that Rocky had canine distemper for a very long time until his skin started melting off of him, and then we shot him. But the thing about that is, canine distemper, if we lived in a very rural area in the forest, so we obviously vaccinated our dog against something like that. But if we had if we were in the city and didn't know about this kind of thing, Petey my dog could have gotten canine distemper, and then very much hurt me and my brothers when we were little kids, because he really wouldn't have any control of that. He'd become very aggressive. So it's really important to understand if this has any effect on that for like zoonotic disease control. Also, raccoons are an invasive species in lots of urban areas, and like could learning about the relationship with anthropogenic food help us combat this sort of invasive population? And are we accidentally causing serious harm to raccoons by not understanding the relationship with urbanization and causing irreversible damage to populations? We don't really know, because we don't really know much about the relationship. This cute fat raccoon. And also, yeah, I did have a pet raccoon, but we did have to shoot him, because canine distemper is not a fun thing. Have a good one. Finally, just some citations. So that's all. Thank you very much.